I'm Stephen Downey, and you are very welcome to episode 36 of the Mindful Living Guide. This week we are chatting to a great guy, Steven Morrin, about OCD. It's a thing that Steve will say himself is really misunderstood, and like he says actually in the conversation, some people think it's just about cleaning. It's not, it's a real difficult mental illness that unfortunately Stephen has had to live with, and we get to talk about many things on his journey, what it's like to live with OCD, how he was misdiagnosed for many years, and what the difference is between perfectionism and OCD. It's a great conversation and some fantastic tips from Steve on how to, as he put it in his own words, accept but not accept the diagnosis that he was given. He's a great guy. It's a great conversation, and it's part of our series of getting men to talk about our mental health. So I really hope you enjoy this week's episode of the Mindful Living Guide. So you're very welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Living Guide. I am absolutely delighted to finally sit down with our guest today. We had a chat about this well over a year ago in a forest, and it seemed like a great idea at the time. And I hung up my microphone for a year. But when I put them back on, I said there was one person in particular I wanted to talk about. And today I am talking to Steven Morrin. He is a very active member of the Irish Trail Runners, but also the founder of a fantastic group called Mind, Body and Mountains. And Steve, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve-O.
As we said a few weeks ago when we want to talk about this, one of the things about my podcast at the moment is that I want to try and make it a lot more transparent for men to just sit there and talk about their mental health. And one way of doing that is by having open conversations ourselves, so people know it's okay to chat. So I'm very happy to have it on. For people don't know you at all, can you give just a background about yourself, about your running, and then we'll go into your general journey as well.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, so just a bit of background on myself. Look, I'm 47-year-old lad. I'm lived a normal life, I suppose. Always mad into sport, stuff like that. My big love when I was growing up was soccer. I was that lad where you see him running up and down, up to the shops, back from the shops with the ball. That was me, like. So yeah, I was very active, always into exercise and school sports and running and all that kind of thing. And then as I got older and injuries and all came along, I got big time into running. And I had a bit of back trouble over the years, so getting back into running was a bit scary at the start. But when I got back into it, I fell in love with it again, and that was especially the day. And I think it was around 5 years ago. I went up to do a trail run, and I remember going up that morning and thinking, right, this is going to be different, running up and down mountains and hills, and I knew it was going to be a challenge. But I fell in love with it from day one. And if I'm without being dramatic, it helped change my life in many ways, like.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it about 5 years. It's really helped me in kind of what made my whole life, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And like it's one of the reasons that I wanted to come on as well to talk, because as part of that conversation we had that day, you opened up about your own health problems over the years and how running has made a massive difference to it. And it's one thing that I'm dying to talk about, because it's something I think that's misunderstood a lot, is that you've suffered with OCD in the past. And can you tell people just about what it is and what the difference it makes in your life?
sure, yeah, yeah. So I was diagnosed with OCD in 2018, right? I reckon estimate I was living with it for about 4 years before that without really knowing what it was, right? And the word you used there, Stephen, misunderstood, is that I put that word in neon lights when it comes to OCD, because OCD is unbelievably misunderstood. It's a term that's thrown around very lightly. It's a term that's thrown around nearly in a comedy way as well, which is a bit frustrating. But it is the reality of OCD is it's a very, very serious mental health illness, disorder, and disorder being the main word there, which is kind of misunderstood. OCD is thought of as just that people who want to keep things clean, people who want to keep things in order. Um, you might want all their pictures straight, but that's it. But the reality of OCD is that people that are living with it, it's a living hell. It is an absolute living hell. And I can speak so much about it. It's unreal. So if you can imagine, for me, um, I was living with it for 4 years, not knowing what it was, kind of misdiagnosed, getting treated for anxiety. Um, and it really shook me to the core for that period of time, and not only that period of time, but until I got my until I got actually diagnosed with it. I was trying just barely keep my head above water, living life, right. And I suppose, if you were to Google OCD tomorrow or today, and there's loads of information about it, it will give you that just two parts to it, right? First of all, there's obsessive thoughts, okay, that are really overwhelming. Um, they lead to anxiety. Uh, you know, you start to catastrophize these thoughts. And then what happens is the next stage is the compulsions, right? So somebody with
Mhm.
OCD, and I'll give you an example of a thought, right? Um, Somebody would say checking OCD, right? And that would affected me in work at the time. So what happens is, so I'd go, and my job, and it's a lot of checking batch numbers and sell by dates and stuff like that. It's really, really important. So my thought would be, okay, so I've just checked a batch number, right? I'm happy with that. 2 seconds later, did you check that properly, right? And then I'd go back and I'd check it again. And at my absolute worst, I'd be going back checking 4, 5, 6 times, right? So that's at the moment might sound to somebody like something, okay, that's okay. So you're going back and checking. But the reality of it is, my brain then starts going, okay, well, what if you didn't check that properly? And what if this product, goes out to market? And what if somebody uses this product and they die? And that's the catastrophizing side of OCD, right? The next stage would be the compulsion, and the compulsion to things I would do to then try and stop my brain thinking this way, right? And the compulsion would be, first of all, I might force myself back down to check the batch number again. Then I might, if I went home from work, for example, and I couldn't shake the thought, I'm getting out paper and I'm writing down, okay, this is okay. These are reasons it's okay. You start doing everything you can to justify to yourself or convince yourself that everything's okay. But the problem with OCD is OCD does not let that go. And OCD holds on to that. It attacks your core values, stuff that's important to you, that, where you're a good person and you want to do right. And that's just that's one example of how, I suppose, OCD just basically can take over your life, how debilitating it is. And I had that 24/7, 365 so for 4 years, and then I'd say for another year and a half after getting diagnosed, until I started to really get a hold of it, really learn how to manage it,
Mhm.
to start to recover. And that's just one example. And that's a mild example I'm actually giving there, but it's to try and let people understand what somebody with OCD is going through. And that's checking OCD, right?
Yeah.
There's all different types of OCD. I had another one called hit and run OCD, where I'd be driving around in my car over and over again, back to the same spot, thinking I'd hit somebody. And the rational side of my brain would be saying, you didn't hit somebody, but the OCD taking over has me
Wow.
convinced I've hit somebody. And I remember, at times coming home from work or coming home from being out, say 45 minutes to an hour late, and my wife kind of going, what happened? Like, where were you? And I'm making all these excuses.
Mhm.
But I've been driving around for 45 minutes, going back to the same spot and checking to make sure there's nobody dead or there's no ambulance there.
Jeez.
So, but when I'm explaining to people, I'm trying to let them understand, can you not just to listen to that, but to actually try and try and think about that for a minute and go, can you imagine if that was me? You know, and that's the reality of what OCD is. It's not a quirky behavior trait. It's a serious, serious illness, and it
One
destroys people.
one thing that struck me when we were chatting about it, and I was talking about someone I know, and I thought that maybe it might be a kind of a perfectionism in them, and it was actually when I said you actually let me talk at the time for a few minutes about it and said nothing. And then I said something about they had an obsession that if they didn't do this, something bad would happen to other members of their family. And I think that was the trigger where you just stopped me and tried to said, Stephen, that's definitely OCD. There was
Yeah.
like it wasn't if the overriding thought is convinced there's a consequence to that thought. Would that be saying right?
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head, and I do remember that conversation.
Yeah.
And you're one of a few people in my life who I've met who have had this conversation with, when I'm able to, through an experience that I don't want in my life, I'm able to see, okay, that sounds to me like it's OCD. And that's another example of OCD basically that you've described there, where
Mhm.
somebody, um their OCD is affecting them in a way that they think bad things are going to happen to, say, a family member, a
Mhm.
friend, whatever family member. Normally it's the people close to you, because
Mhm.
again, OCD attacks your core values, right? So they would say that, the OCD is affecting them in such a bad way that they think, okay, well, if I don't wash my hands for 20 minutes, if I don't flick the light switch 48 times, my parents are going to die.
Mhm.
Now, that can sound ridiculous, and I've seen it joked about before, right? But the reality is that is OCD at its absolute worst. And that person is so stuck in that obsessive thought, and then their compulsion or their ritual after, by flicking that light 48 times. That's OCD. That's OCD
Yeah.
at its absolute worst, and in OCD's case, at its best. Because it's for somebody with OCD, the OCD in that scenario is winning. It's beating them. But yeah, that's another example. And again, I try to say to people, try and absorb that moment. Try and think about what your life would be like if that's the way you were, And that's
It's
why it's so debilitating, Stephen. It's horrendous,
I was literally about to say the same word. It just sounds like so debilitating to be kind of
Yeah,
stuck in those constant thoughts like that.
yeah.
Um, what if like you went through 4 years of this and
Mm.
then you went and you got diagnosed? Was there a turning point there then that you said, right, this is too much. I need to get help on this.
Yeah. I suppose in that time before I got diagnosed, a little part of me knew, especially near the end of the 4 year period, not long before I got diagnosed, I'd be I'm very aware of my own thoughts, which is good, right?
Mhm.
I think it's a great thing, no matter what
Yeah,
has come along in my life because of that. I think it's a great thing.
yeah,
And there was part of me going, I've got stagnant here. So getting treated for anxiety, etc., I was getting to a certain point, and I was feeling better to a certain point, but it still wasn't right. I knew there was something not right because I was still giving in to OCD without realizing it. Um, and I suppose for me, I wouldn't even call it a turning point. And I hope this really helps somebody listening to this. I'd call it not accepting the way I was, knowing I could be better. So I remember well, not to go off subject, but I'll come back to a point I made one time about accepting it, but not accepting it. So remind me there somewhere along the
yeah.
way to talk about that. So I wouldn't call it a turning point. I'd call it more, for anybody out there struggling, having it in you to look at yourself and say, okay, do I think I'm at a point where I'm managing my mental health illness really well, or do I think there could be improvements? Do I see myself, or have I seen other examples of maybe where this could be better? And that's what it was for me, not giving up. Being aware, going, okay, yeah, I'm at a certain point, but this is still not right. I'm still really struggling here,
Mhm.
So for that reason, Steve, I was always still looking out for better help and listening and kind of researching and stuff like that. And my wife, basically, how I found out about OCD, because I didn't know a lot about it myself at the time, was my wife, Therese, was listening to the radio one day, and there was a lady on called Leslie Shoemaker, who was actually the founder of OCD Ireland and is an expert in OCD. I think she was on the Nicky Byrne show. I think it was on Today FM or 2FM, whatever it was. But Teresa heard this one day just driving along in the car, and she was talking about OCD. And obviously, Teresa recognized from the outside looking in, wow, that's a lot of that Stephen, right? So she came home to me, and look, cutting a long story short, she basically said, look, have a look at this, Google, go onto the website, or go onto the 2FM website and see if you can find that show. So obviously I found it very easily. It was there on the day, and I listened to the talk that they had with Leslie. And while I wasn't able to relate to a lot of it, there was two parts I remember that I was like, oh my God, this is totally me.
It must have
And I
been like
knew
a
at that
eureka
moment,
moment.
yeah, it was a eureka moment. But at the same time, I wanted to get talk to the girl maybe and get
Yeah,
diagnosed properly.
yeah,
So that's what I did. I ended up getting in touch with Leslie, and I went into her. And basically, within half an hour of talking, she said to me, "Look, I'm sorry to tell you this, but this is OCD. You probably have just been misdiagnosed through no fault of anybody, because OCD is a very specialized kind of a mental health illness."
mhm.
And she said, "So there is a bit of a journey for you. It's very tough, but you'll get there," kind of thing. So yeah, turning points. I think there is turning points in life, but I think in this case it was more just not giving up, not accepting until I felt like, okay, now I'm managing this.
Mhm. Wow. And from there, then the journey, like it's, um, what kind of tools? I know obviously your first advice were for people to talk to people, because I'm sure that there's so many different types of OCD and so many things that. But if you could give any sort of tools to people, um, to help them along their journey,
Mm.
what would you advise?
Is this with OCD in particular,
Just
Stephen?
know OCD in particular, and then
Yeah.
maybe in mental health in general. Then after that, but
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I actually love that question, because again, it's trying to help people, and maybe they can take two or three things from what we are talking about today and go,
absolutely,
God, I might try that.
yeah,
So my advice is always the same. It'd be very consistent. Is that, first of all, and I use this term in a very serious way, because I think the never give up term can be very a passive term. So
mhm,
people can see it and go, oh yeah, never give up. That's great. But actually, never give up being put into action is so strong and so powerful, right? So I never gave up, basically, right? So for me, the advice I can give based on that is, um, whatever. First of all, you're looking to get diagnosed, right? You're looking to get diagnosed with what it is, and it's not instant. Sometimes it can take time. In fact, the figures for OCD say that it can take up to 9 years to get diagnosed, right? Because OCD is so misunderstood, and there's a lot of, say, counselors out there and doctors out there who don't know an awful lot about it. Now, I have first-hand experience of speaking to doctors who didn't have a clue about OCD, and that's no fault of theirs.
mm,
But the problem is, I've experienced them saying they knew all about it, but when I look back to stuff they were saying to me, they didn't actually know anything about it, and that can be a little bit dangerous, right?
mhm,
So it's the best advice is that no matter what mental health illness that you're going through, but with OCD in particular, it's, having that awareness in yourself of whatever you're getting treated with. So if you're getting treated for anxiety, for example, and you get to a certain point and you're doing really, really well, but within yourself that there's more can be done. It's reaching out again. It's kind of reaching out again. So it's like, you know getting diagnosed is the ultra most important thing in any mental health illness, in order to start your recovery. Once you get diagnosed, then the building blocks come in place. So when I got diagnosed with OCD, then I was put in touch with an OCD psychiatrist, who was an absolute expert in it, who knew everything about it. I was on medication at the time, but then when I went to this guy, then I was on the correct medication, right? So there's your path. You get diagnosed by an expert. You then go to a doctor, or a psychiatrist who's an expert. So you're getting the help from the specialist, then you're getting the right medication from the doctor, and then that gave me the calmness and the control to actually be able to nearly go from being my mind going 24/7 crazy, to suddenly it was like, okay, okay, I have this
yeah,
calmness about me now, and now I'm able to put into play the tools they're giving me to help myself. And for me, that's what it was. And when I'm explaining that, and there's quite a lot to it, and I totally
mhm,
understand that, because sometimes when you ask the question, you're told it's very simple. Oh, you just do this and you just do
yeah,
this. Oh yeah, talk to somebody. It's right, and I understand that. But to really get the help, I think it's important to show people, first of all, it's not a quick fix. It's not an easy journey. There will be loads of there will be, I suppose, I suppose not mishaps along the way, but little trips along the way until you get there. But by not giving up and not accepting until you feel right, that eventually that you will get there.
It sounds more like a journey than a destination that you
Oh,
have to realize that
100%.
it's going to be on. And I think it's extremely important as well. One of the points we're making here is that while we give tips on that, every single person, no matter what mental health issue you may identify with, that
Mm.
every single person is different. That you
Yeah,
can't listen to one person and say, "Oh, I did this and this will fix you." It won't.
yeah,
This is why we need to talk to open up these conversations so people talk to professionals and
100%. Yeah.
understand what kind of will help them in their journey.
Mm.
One thing that I know has been very, very helpful for you has been exercise. Would I be right in saying
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Oh, listen, 100%. Exercise is probably. I remember talking to my own GP, and I love her. She's absolutely brilliant, and she was saying to me that exercise is the most underutilized tool for mental health. Where I've always been into my exercise, and I think that's really helped me in life in general, anyway. But as part of my own recovery, it was I think getting the medication was brilliant because that
Mhm.
gives you calmness so that you can start to help yourself, right? But um, the exercise along with other things was absolutely key to my own recovery because the exercise, as we know, we hear it all the time. It releases the feel good endorphins and that kind of thing. But um, it's again that can be a very passive thing. People hear it, but when you put that into action as part of a mental health journey, as part of recovery, and maybe somebody who's even not suffering with mental health, just exercise alone, the feeling it gives you is just unbelievable. It's beautiful. It
Mhm.
really is unreal. So that was part of a few little things that I put together for my own recovery. Um, I think running up the mountains was though a bit of a bonus at the time because, again, one of the things that really helps all people is getting out in nature. Uh, there's being around trees, and I know people laugh about hugging a tree, but that actually does amazing things for you.
There's
It's
there's a
really good. You're in nature. You're
there's a great quote I saw on your Facebook page actually, and it says,
mm,
I took a walk in the woods and I came out taller than the trees." I think
exactly.
that sums up what you're saying very, very well, I think.
Yeah, it does. It's unbelievable, and I just fell in love with it, and it nearly became gas suffering from OCD, and it became an obsession. But there you go, um, massive part of my recovery, and I at the time it was when you just I remembered some of the mornings going up right, and I could have had an absolutely horrendous day the day before, or that morning, or probably driving up. That's how bad it was at one stage. But you get up, you run around the mountains for 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, whatever you do. You're talking to people. You're away from the norm. You're getting a
Mhm.
break from the norm, which is a key part of recovery as well. Changing up what you do. And you come back down, you've sweated, you've exercised, you've maybe talked to people, you've maybe got some stuff off your chest. You go home and you're set up for the whole day. You're set up for the weekend. Sometimes you're set up for days. And it can just be the difference between maybe sitting at home overthinking, for example.
Mhm.
Because if the more you're at home overthinking this stuff, it can really get in on you. So yeah, I can't. Again, when it comes to advice, it's you know, get diagnosed. Talk to specialists. Get the help you need. Go and talk in groups if you can. Get a really good therapist if you can. Exercise, diet. Here's one of the biggest things my psychologist said to me, a psychiatrist, sorry, said to me. He asked me he pointed out treat before we even started talking about
Yeah.
OCD. He said, one, do you sleep properly? Two,
Mhm.
is your diet good? And three, do you exercise? My answer to all of them was yes, because I do
Mhm.
look after myself.
Yeah.
But before we even talked about OCD, he said they're the three elements I need you doing in order to then start really helping yourself recover. And I love that because it's the basics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sleep, food, exercise. That's anybody going through anything.
And
They are your key elements, big time.
it's so overlooked in so many other things though as well, that like how
Mm,
fundamental that is. And I know like I've let my exercise slip over the last few years, and I can see a massive difference in
okay.
my own kind of, I think, I wouldn't say just my health, but my approach to myself. I think when I've been exercising and I've been out there and I've gone on some of the walks. I haven't I haven't progressed to the to running up and down mountains like a goat like yourself now, but the I have gone out on a few of the walks in the nature, and I've noticed such a difference. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's I don't know if it's just the endorphins or what, but or just seeing the view and just being able to look down over the world. Like it's
Mm.
we are blessed to have some of we both live within the Dublin region, and just to have some of the most beautiful scenic mountain ranges around on our doorstep. Like it's amazing.
It is, Theo, and you've actually, the way you described it there is very good. You don't know whether it's the endorphins, it's the walk, it's looking down on the world. I when there's a part actually, there's a few parts around Crua and even around the Hellfire Club where you actually one of our coaches in the run club encourages us to stop, because when your head down is down running, it's very easy to keep running. He said he encourages us to stop and at moments take a little look. And when I'm doing it, I'm standing there in the mountains on a Saturday morning. It is beautifully quiet, and you look down at Dublin City, and I say, well, that's the madness. This is the calm, and that's what it is. I think what you're saying there, when you're walking out in nature, Steve-O, and you've said to treat them there, and you're going, I'm wondering what it is, and it's all
Yeah.
three. It is all three. It's and anybody that over the years that we and I have introduced to this kind of an environment, they just love it, and they're saying it to you, oh my god, I'm so glad I started this, I'm so glad I'm out here. And even walking around, people open up to you as well. That, like, they start to open up to you too, and that's what it's all about, because we're just trying to help, isn't it? It's so simple, just trying to help.
Yeah.
And even if it's just, I know you hear it all the time, but even if it's one person,
Mhm.
a small little thing like getting them out of their house and seeing
Yeah.
like-minded people up, having a little walk up in the mountains, it's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. Yeah.
It's brilliant. If we go back to you were asking me earlier on to remind you about accepting and not
Mm,
accepting. Um, do you want to go back into that?
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, when I first got diagnosed with the OCD, at the time, then I was going through that part of my journey and trying to find what would help.
Mhm.
One of the things was OCD Ireland would do talks in St. Patrick's. And Leslie was the one who actually put me onto that. So she said, as part of, let's start getting you the help you need. She
Mhm.
recommended going to them. So I started going to them. That would have been kind of late 2018 and into early 2019. So basically, what it is you go along. There's a couple of nights they do them, and you sit around, and it is depending how many are there, 10 to 20 people who suffer with OCD, all the different types as well that I would have read about in some of the books. And it's a circle, like very, like you see on TV and all that. You've got a couple of people who are experts who are kind of, running the class, and you basically get to talk. You get to open up about your OCD. You get to listen to other people, and it gives you such a sense of relief listening to other people who have OCD and are similar to you, and they know exactly what you're going through. So, I talked no problem on the first night. I just let it get a few things off my chest, and I continued going for a period of time. But as I was going, obviously, I was still I was still on a journey, and still very much getting better and learning how to manage my OCD, and I was going in the right direction very, very slowly. So I remember one of the last ones I was at, I said, I was chatting away, and I said to them, when it comes to my OCD, one thing, the point in time I'm at now is that I accept it, but I don't accept it. And I could see them looking on, what the hell is he talking about? Like, people, what does that mean? And I said, well, I accept that I have OCD, but I don't accept it taking over my life. And that's been a massive help for me, because yeah, I accepted it, and I'd be a very positive person. I said, right, I said, this is the card I've been dealt. Do I sit around moping about this, or do I get on with it? And I don't mean as in when in years gone by and older times, people say you just have to get on with it. Not at all. But I said I can either sit and feel sorry for myself, or I can say, right, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to learn to manage this, not to get rid of it, to learn to manage it. So that's what I mean by that. I accepted I had OCD. I said, right, that's the card I've been dealt, you know. But I said, I'm not accepting feeling this way, and it's taking over my life and it's ruining my life. And I said, so I'm going to do whatever I can to get to a level where I'm managing it well and I can start living life again. And I've used that. That's been a massive part, just using that thing alone to get better,
That
And
is
after
such
that
a
chat, sorry, just the thing was after that chat, the amount of people in the group that came to me and went, "Oh my God, that's such a cool way of thinking about it." And even the girls who were running it at the time came out and actually called me back, and they just said, "We've actually never heard somebody in one of the groups ever speak that way." I said, "Look," I said, "I'm just being me. That's who I am. That's helped me." And I just shared it with the group. It's as simple as that, like, you know. And it's a massive statement. I think anybody with mental health illness could use that, and it would really help them. If you know, it's like an affirmation, nearly, isn't it?
it's such a powerful, powerful thing to do because
Mm,
there's many things when something like this happens to us and it's a shock. It's something different. It's something that we're not expecting, but we may want to kind of ignore it or switch it off and kind of say, right, no, that's not part of me, or but to actually just accept, yes, this is part of me, but
yeah.
it's not going to take over my life.
Mm,
And I think it goes down to it's learning to live with it rather than against it. Well, that
absolutely. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. That's totally it. Learning to live with it, Stephen, is exactly it.
yeah.
It's not the nicest thing you hear when somebody tells you you've got a mental health illness that in general, OCD. It said that you can't get rid of it,
Mhm.
but you can learn to manage it. You know,
Yeah.
and when I did my own research as well, I kind of seen that look, it's not. I don't know the statistic or anything like that, and I did hear of one or two cases where people completely it was gone from their lives.
Mhm.
But in general, what you see is, and I hate saying this, you see a lot of people suffering with it who just cannot get themselves to a level that they can manage it. And I do understand that, I really do. Um, but if you can get to a level where you can manage it, and it does take hard work, it's not
Mhm.
easy. That's where you want to be. You want to be managing at a level that you can get yourself back living life, you know, going to work comfortably, socializing comfortably. Because OCD actually takes over your social life as well.
Yeah.
Another way it affected me, and this is to help give people a variation of the ways that it can affect you, is that I got to a point, you know, I think from what you know of me, you know, I'm a chatty guy. I come across confident. I'm a bit of laugh. I'm a bit of crack. I don't take life too serious. And that's because of what I've seen in my own life over the years and all that. None of us should take life too serious, right? When OCD had a grip on me, I was a shell of a man. And so one of the ways it affected me is if I was having a conversation either with an individual or with a group of people, I would have that conversation and go away and dissect every last detail, thinking, okay, what did I say to that person? Have I upset that person? Have I offended that person? Have I said something wrong? Now, we all have them kind of thoughts. You know, that's a fact. We all have them
Mhm.
kind of thoughts. But with somebody at OCD, it's multiplied by 1,000, and then it's catastrophized by a million, and that's 24/7, 365. So I remember sitting in the canteen and work. I remember just even being out with friends, and I would sit there in silence because I was afraid to talk in case I offended anybody or I said something that was wrong or that would get somebody into trouble. And it's that's another example of how it affects people, like, you know. So yeah, learning to
Um,
manage it is key.
I think the word you're saying there about the catastrophizing, sorry, I'm
Yeah,
saying it wrong, catastrophizing side of it
yeah,
is what makes a massive difference on it. Because I know for myself, I've in the past now I suffer with anxiety bit, and it'd be
mm,
a similar experience where I'd have a conversation with someone and I'd relive it over and over again.
yeah,
But it would be to a certain level. You wouldn't catastrophize. And I think that's the one big thing I took from the conversation that we had a while ago about this
mm,
is how how serious the conversation can get in your head and how much worry you would have, which it makes a major difference in it.
yeah,
One a few things I'm noticing here, and from my mindfulness training, and one of the things that we'd love to get to, is that to be able to separate the thoughts from yourself. And there's a phrase I often use when I'm meditating is that my thoughts are not my own,
mm.
and that it seems like that, like, would the likes of meditation or mindfulness to try and separate and kind of bring that gap between stimulus or thought and reaction. Would meditation help with OCD in that way?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes, it does, because I use mindfulness is my thing.
Mhm.
And again, I've mindfulness, sorry, mindful meditation, I should say, sorry, is the right way of putting it. I've again tinkered with that until I found what really helped me. I found it very hard at the start, and I think a lot of people kind of say that because I think for me, when I started mindfulness, I was overthinking it. So I was there going, what way am I meant to feel? Am I meant to feel this huge relief? But I think, and you definitely know more about it than me, Stephen. But what I think I've seen with looking into mindfulness and meditation is that they recommend is to keep going with it, to keep doing it, because experience makes it better. And I've seen that myself. So I remember the first ever time I introduced myself to mindfulness was a guy called Paddy Brosnan.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
And I went to a workshop up in City West, I think it was a long time ago. And I even found that workshop really helpful. And I remember he did a few mindfulness exercises, and there was loads of people in the room. But I remember leaving that day just feeling just so relaxed and calm, and just, not a major. It's not like I walked out, going, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
great." It was more just feeling nice and calm,
Yeah.
no drama. Just I noticed it had made a difference, kind of thing. And from there, I started. When I was really bad with the OCD, and then sorry, especially when I got diagnosed and part of my recovery, I was actually doing it quite regularly.
Hmm.
So yeah, what I found is taking that moment to yourself, if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or it's a half an hour session of mindful meditation or mindfulness or whatever it may be, if anything, it stops the brain from the thoughts you're going through in that moment or at that time, because you are being mindful. I think a very good way of describing it is our brains are on autopilot all the time. But if you're suffering with a mental health illness or OCD, um, the brain can be quite that the noises, the voices, not the chattering away
Yeah.
and telling you you're not good enough and stuff like that. Taking a moment to do mindfulness stops that. And again, I try to keep things so simple. Sometimes people get a bit overwhelmed with advice and go, Mindfulness, it does this, it does that." But I think you stop and go, okay, hold on a minute here. What can mindfulness do for me right now? Okay, well, it can stop me overthinking for a minute, even if it's for 5 minutes. And it's just taking the brain in a different direction for that moment. And that alone is sorry, that would be one of the ways I look at it, even just to give myself some temporary relief.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Like you hit the nail
Okay.
in the head on so much of it, because there's one thing that I often, whenever I'm teaching mindfulness, is that I try to help people, especially people that are new, to let go of any anticipation or any striving that it should be certain way or should be it should and it's very hard when you take on something new. There's always this kind of process to it that you feel, oh, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that, or I should be thinking a certain way. And
Yeah.
for me, especially as well, is that like with mindfulness, it's about letting go of any desire to think in a certain way. And just, it's like if you think of a snow globe, right? It's like if you shake up a snow globe and it's just full, you can't see through it. But it's literally by just letting go of any anticipation, any thought, and everything just settles to the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's when
Mm.
you get that clarity and that vision. But I'm delighted to know that though that mindfulness has helped in some way. Because when you're talking about it, I was thinking like, yeah, he's like it's about just giving yourself that little bit of space,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. And it leads on to a question I want to ask, because I ask every single guest.
Mm.
And the reason I ask this question is because every single person has a different interpretation of mindfulness, different interpretation of mindful living. And
Okay.
I think it's very, very important for people to hear this, because so many people think that mindfulness has to be done a certain way. People have that's the people that, or those people that practice mindfulness, they sit in a corner in a room for 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and that's the only way to practice. I could
Okay.
never do that.
Okay.
And
I'm just saying. Mm.
yeah, and I struggle, and I've always been very transparent about my own practice, that sometimes I struggle to sit and practice, so I have to bring
Okay.
it into my life in other ways. So sorry, I'm kind of going tangent there, but the question I want to ask is, what does mindful living mean to you?
Yeah. So again, listen to the way you're talking about it there. It resonates with me so much in that um, people think in order to do mindfulness, you need to be sitting in a room with candles on, incense burning, and all that. And the reality is that you don't. So to answer your question, first of all, what does mindful living mean to me? It's for me at the point I'm at now, and I'm glad I'm at the point I'm at now because I think I have it right. But I think I have it right for me. Is that it's learning just to live in the now, to live in the moment. That doesn't mean I'm going around 24/7, 365, just living in the moment. It's just having the ability to do it if I need to do it. And that's how it's worked for me. So, for example, right, I can do it. For example, give another example of in work, right? Um, Thankfully, my OCD moments are have gone literally from a million to 100, and that's not exaggerating. That's how good it is, right? But what I've learned, a way I've learned to use mindfulness is if I'm having a moment, right? And I also learned this through a book about OCD I read called Brain Lock, right? So I'm in work, I'm having a moment. OCD is knocking on the door, trying to get in, right? I never learned through this book, first of all, but through practicing mindfulness and trying to understand how it works, is that I'm able to stop in the moment and go, okay, what's happening here? This is not you. I'm obsessing over the batch number again, right? I'm saying this is not you. This is your OCD. This is your OCD knocking on the door. It's not you. It's not your thought. And walking away. So that's an OCD moment. Sorry, that's where I have used mindfulness to help me, and I'm not in a room for 20 minutes. I'm just in the moment. And I think with OCD recovery, that's the key. Is when we're in their moments, most when you're really bad, it takes over. But it's you having a tool to stop and go, okay, what's going on here, and having that awareness to stop and go, that's what's on here. So with OCD, that for me is mindful living. That for me is mindful living. But the thing is, it's a very hard thing to do. It takes a lot of practice, you know. And then in normal life, Sivo, maybe just going for a walk. First of all, when I go for a walk or run, I don't use headphones because I want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in the moment. I want to be recognizing and looking at the trees and the sky and listening to the sounds around me, right? And when I'm going for a run, for example, I'm looking at the trees. I'm not obsessing over them, but I'm watching it and I'm walking and going, oh my God, this is so beautiful. That's being mindful. Whereas if I'm up there going, right, later on, I'm running along, later on, I've got to do this, got to do that. Oh, Jesus, tomorrow I've got something else. Then you're not being mindful. So it's simplifying it, I think, is a good thing.
And just noticing
Yeah.
when it's not working. That's actually one of the biggest things that mindfulness has ever given me, is
Mm,
that just that ability to notice when,
yeah.
geez, like I you give out to someone and you go, oh, you're in a bad mood. Why are you in a bad
Mm,
mood, Stephen? It's the simple things,
yeah.
it's the simple good things we can get from it. um Stephen, like, I absolutely loved our conversation. Is there something that we haven't talked about or haven't touched on that you'd love to talk about, or that you think would help other people?
Um, yeah. Look, one thing, I'm very much at a stage where I think I've always been the kind of person, and I can sense it from you, I can sense it from other people in my life who are carers. Okay, and this my actually one of my counselors described this to me, that some people are born in life and you're a carer, you care about other people, you want to help, right? So, um, for me, it's just whether you suffer from OCD or it's depression or whatever it is, right? Just, and I know I do understand there's different levels. And something you said earlier on is something I go by unbelievably, is that we're all different. There's not a one-stop shop. I see it too many times, and I don't like being critical of experts, etc. But sometimes they're trying to push their agenda down your throat. This is the gold standard. This is what works. So the best bit of advice I can give is find what works for you. This is about you. This is your journey, and try everything. So when it comes to the help, first of all, seek professional help. That is the key here. Seek professional help, but try of the help that you're going to get and of the advice that you're going to get. Try everything until you find what works for you. That's the key to it. It's your journey. It's not anybody else's. And just because A, B, and C work for a person you may know, it doesn't mean A, B, C, and work for you. So just find what works for you. And I mean this word not in a passive way. I mean this saying, sorry, not in a passive way. In the most honest way ever is never, never give up.
Wow. I think that's a lovely way to just finish up this conversation. I think is never give up on yourself, on your journey, or on just helping other people, and knowing
Yeah,
that just having one conversation may open up someone else to go, I think I might talk about that. I
yeah.
might get out there. So listen, Stephen, thank you so much. I'm sorry I took well over a year to get you on the podcast, but it has been an absolute pleasure. I have learned so much from it, and I know that there will be people out there that will learn a lot from it. What I'll do is I'll get contacts from yourself about OCD Ireland or any other resources that you feel would help people, and I'll stick them on the show notes page for when this goes live as well, so that
Perfect. Yeah.
people have just a signpost just to where to go if they want to look for more help as well. So it'll help you. But listen, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Living Guide.
Thanks very much, Steve, for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, thanks so much. And I just really hope this helps somebody.
I really got a lot from that episode myself, and I think you'll agree that Stephen is very passionate about helping others and just raising awareness about OCD. If any of this conversation has triggered you to look for help, one place to look is the ocdireland.org website, where you got lots of tips about looking for help, and they actually have a section for seeking help and how to get help from that. Listen, thanks so much again for joining us for this conversation and just shown that it's okay for men to talk. It's okay for us to ask for help, and it's okay when we're not feeling the same way we used to. So please, if you're in any way triggered by this episode, or you feel just, you know what, I do need to talk, reach out and find someone to talk to. And hopefully, like Steve said, this episode has made one difference to some person. If you feel like sharing, I'd really, really appreciate it. You can also leave ratings on Spotify and on Apple. That really help the show to get out to more and more people and just get the message out there that just about how mindfulness can help you in your everyday life. So thank you again, and I'm Stephen Downey, and this has been the Mindful Living Guide.